In the autumn of 1976, Freddie Mercury sat down and wrote Somebody to Love in 3 days. The sessions were at Rockfield Studio in Wales, the same studio where Bohemian Rhapsody had been recorded a year before. When the recording was finished and the playback came through the speakers for the first time, Freddie Mercury stood in the control room and listened. And Brian May, who was standing beside him, watched something happen in Freddie Mercury's face that he has never fully described. He has said that Freddie was moved. He has said it was an emotional moment. He has not said what the specific quality of that emotion was, what it was about hearing the completed recording of Somebody to Love that produced the response Brian May witnessed. This video is going to try to answer that question. Not because the answer is definitive. Brian May has never given a definitive answer, and Freddie Mercury never gave any answer at all. But because the song contains the answer, if you listen to it the way the person who wrote it was listening to it in that control room. After this video, you will not hear Somebody to Love the same way, not even close. To understand what Freddie Mercury was building when he wrote Somebody to Love, you have to understand where the template came from. He has said in interviews that the song was his attempt to write a gospel song specifically, his attempt to write something in the tradition of Aretha Franklin, whose voice and music Freddie Mercury had admired since the early years of his career. Aretha Franklin was, in 1976, the defining figure of American gospel-influenced soul, the voice that had taken the Black church musical tradition to the widest possible audience. What Freddie Mercury did with this template was specific and technically extraordinary. He overdubbed his own voice approximately 100 times to create the effect of a gospel choir, not a choir of other voices. His own voice layered 100 times, creating from one person the specific sound of many. A solitary voice producing the sound of a congregation, one person sounding like a crowd. This was not the first time a singer had layered their voice in a recording. Overdubbing was a standard studio technique by 1976. But nobody had used it with this specific intent, not to add depth to a solo, but to convert a solo into a choir. Not to augment one person, but to replace the entire congregation with one person. The technical decision and the emotional decision were the same decision. Somebody to Love is, on its surface, a song about wanting love, the simple and universal request its title states. But listen to what the song is actually asking for. The narrator wakes up every morning, faces the day, tries everything, and still cannot find the thing they need. They ask God to give them somebody to love, not a specific person, not romantic love in the conventional sense. Somebody, the word is precise, not the love of a particular person, but the state of being loved, of having the essential human need for connection met. And the scale of the asking, the gospel choir scale, the 100-voice scale, reveals how large the need is. This is not a gentle hope. This is a desperate, full-voiced, 100-person asking. The song's surface says, I would like to find love. The song's actual content says, I am alone in a way that requires the sound of 100 people to describe. This is not the same thing as saying the song is unhappy. It is not an unhappy song. It is an urgent song. And the urgency is the specific urgency of someone who is asking with everything they have, in the largest voice they can construct, for the one thing they most need. The gospel tradition understands this kind of asking, the full body, full voice, congregation scale asking that the Black church tradition developed for exactly the feelings that are too large for an individual expression. Freddie Mercury understood it too. He built it himself, in a studio in Wales, in 3 days, 100 voices, all Freddie Mercury's, creating the sound of a gospel choir from a single person's voice, layered 100 times. The song asks for somebody to love. The asking requires the scale of a congregation, a single voice constructed into a crowd, asking for the specific thing a crowd provides, the feeling of not being alone. After you hear this, you will not hear the opening of Somebody to Love the same way. You will hear one person asking, very loudly, for what everyone in a crowd give the person at the front of it. You will hear Freddie Mercury. The 3 days in which Freddie Mercury wrote Somebody to Love were 3 days of concentrated creative work, the kind of sustained effort that the people who worked with him at Rockfield described as characteristic of his best writing periods. He had an idea for the song's structure, a verse-chorus framework built around the gospel call-and-response pattern, with the piano as the primary harmonic instrument and the layered vocals as the emotional center. The piano playing in the song is his. He plays it with the confidence of a person not working something out, but transcribing something already complete. Brian May and Roger Taylor described the recording sessions as sessions in which their primary job was to stay out of the way. Freddie Mercury had the song, had the arrangement, had the specific sound he was building, and the task was to support his vision rather than to collaborate in the usual Queen sense. This was not typical. Queen was a band in which all four members contributed substantially to the creative process. Bohemian Rhapsody, the album before this one, had been an extraordinary collaborative effort. Somebody to Love was Freddie Mercury alone, working in the specific medium of his own voice, asking a question that required no collaboration to articulate. The approximately 100 overdubbed vocal tracks that constitute the choir sound in Somebody to Love were recorded across the 3 days with a specific technical methodology. Each track was a complete vocal performance, not a fragment, but a full vocal line delivered with the complete commitment Freddie Mercury brought to every take. The specific effect of layering 100 performances of the same vocal line by the same singer is not simple duplication. It creates a new sonic quality that could not be achieved by any other means. The micro variations between each take the tiny differences in breath, in vibrato, in how the voice attacks each note accumulate across 100 layers into the warmth and density of the gospel choir sound. A real choir achieves this with many people. Freddie Mercury achieved it by being many people simultaneously, one take at a time, across 3 days. When the recording was finished and Roy Thomas Baker played the completed mix back in the control room at Rockfield, what Freddie Mercury heard was the full realization of what he had spent 3 days building. 100 versions of his own voice, combined into the sound of a gospel choir asking for somebody to love. Brian May was in the control room. Roger Taylor was there. The band was together for the playback, and Freddie Mercury heard it. And what Brian May saw in Freddie Mercury's face in that moment, the specific quality of what happened when Freddie Mercury heard 100 versions of himself asking for the thing he most needed, was something that Brian May has been careful not to fully describe. He has said it was emotional. He has said Freddie was moved. What he has not said is what it looked like when the person who had just spent 3 days building an entire choir from his own voice in order to ask for the feeling of not being alone, heard what he had built. He built a choir from his own voice, 100 takes, one person, sounding like many. And when he heard what he had built when the playback came through the speakers, and he heard 100 versions of himself asking for somebody to love, Brian May was watching. And what Brian May saw, he has carried for nearly 50 years and has never fully said. The song contains the answer to why. If you listen to the song knowing what you now know about how it was made, the answer is in the first note. The specific quality that Freddie Mercury was reaching for when he wrote Somebody to Love, the quality he identified with Aretha Franklin and with the gospel tradition, is the quality of collective emotional expression. The specific thing that happens when a large group of people sing together about the same feeling, and the feeling becomes larger through the sharing. Gospel music exists because certain feelings are too large for one person to hold alone. The call and response is not simply a musical device. It is a mechanism for distributing the emotional weight of a large feeling across many people. The leader calls the need, and the congregation responds with the validation that the need is real and shared. What Freddie Mercury did with Somebody to Love was build this mechanism alone. He was simultaneously the person with the need and the 100 people validating that the need was real. This is not a metaphor. This is what the recording literally is. 1976 was the year in which the specific shape of Freddie Mercury's private life was changing. He was arriving at the understanding of his own sexuality that he would share with Mary Austin later that year. The relationship with Mary Austin was changing. The private life was in a state of transition that was, by the accounts of people close to him, uncomfortable and uncertain in specific ways. The song he wrote during this period, 3 days, 100 voices, an enormous gospel asking for somebody to love, is not simply a musical exercise. It is the emotional document of someone asking, with every resource available, for the specific thing they most need. The asking is big because the need is big. The 100 voices are his voice because the 100 voices are him, the single person who needs what the song is asking for, requiring the scale of a congregation to communicate the scale of the need. Brian May was in the control room. He had known Freddie Mercury for 6 years. He understood what he was hearing. Some things are not Brian May's to describe. They were Freddie's. What happened in the control room when Freddie Mercury heard 100 versions of himself asking for somebody to love, that was Freddie Mercury's private moment. And Brian May was present for it. And Brian May has chosen to respect the privacy of what he witnessed by not describing it completely. The song is what Freddie said. The playback moment is what Freddie felt when he heard himself say it. The song is enough. The song is the whole answer. Somebody to Love has been played at more funerals, more memorial services, and more moments of collective grief than almost any other rock song of its era. This is not a coincidence. The song was built for exactly this use, built with the specific sonic architecture of collective expression, the gospel choir structure that exists to hold feelings too large for a single voice. When Somebody to Love plays at a funeral, it is doing what it was built to do, providing the sound of many people expressing a feeling together, giving the feeling the scale it needs to be adequately expressed. The person who wrote it understood this need from the inside. He built the choir himself because the need was that large. And when the choir plays at funerals, when the 100 versions of Freddie Mercury's voice, asking for somebody to love, are heard in rooms where people are grieving, it works because the person who made it knew what it was for. He had made it for himself. Somebody to Love became, in the concert context, one of the most powerful examples of the performer-audience circuit that this channel has explored across many videos. In the studio, Freddie Mercury had been the choir himself. On stage, the audience became the choir. The call and response that was a single person's internal dialogue in the studio recording became, in a concert, the actual external dialogue between a performer and the people who had come to hear him. The need expressed in the studio became, in the concert, the meeting of the need. Somebody to Love, found, in the room, in the crowd, in the 100,000 people giving back what the song had asked for. In the studio, one person building a choir from his own voice to ask for the feeling of not being alone. On stage, 100,000 people providing exactly what the studio recording had asked for. The asking and the answer, separated by the performance. The need and its meeting. This is what Somebody to Love is. This is why it plays at funerals. This is what Brian May saw in the control room. This is what he has never said, because the song already said it. Freddie Mercury wrote Somebody to Love in 3 days in autumn 1976. He recorded approximately 100 overdubbed vocal tracks to build a gospel choir from his own voice. He asked, in the largest and most complete voice he could construct, for somebody to love. And when the playback came through the speakers in the control room at Rockfield Studio, and Brian May was standing beside him and the 100 voices filled the room, something happened in Freddie Mercury's face that Brian May has never fully described and has never needed to fully describe, because the song describes it completely. You have heard Somebody to Love many times. You will hear it again. And the next time you hear the opening choir, the layered warmth of a single voice asking in 100 versions, you will know what you are hearing. You will hear one person, sounding like many, asking for the specific thing that the stage would eventually give him. The feeling, for the duration of a concert, of not being alone. He asked. The song is the asking. The crowds were the answer. He found it in the end, every night, on every stage, in every room that heard him sing,